There's this really passionate and honestly pretty heated debate blowing up online about what it means to be Black in America. And right at the center of it is a term you might be hearing a lot more: Foundational Black American, or FBA. So we're going to dive into a live conversation to really unpack the arguments and see what's driving this whole movement. You know, this quote right here from a caller named Miss Ha, it really gets to the heart of the FBA movement. It's all about feeling like your identity is being questioned or denied. That's the gaslighting part. And it's this powerful statement that, hey, after centuries in America, we have become our own unique people.
All right, so here's the game plan for this explainer. First, we're going to lay out the core ideas behind the FBA position. Then we'll get into two big challenges that came up in this conversation, one from a Nigerian American caller and another from an Afro-Latino perspective, to really see where the friction is.
Okay, let's start with the basics. What is the foundational Black American stance, really? Well, at its core, it's an argument for a very specific and unique lineage, one that supporters say is completely distinct from any other group on the planet.
Now, the host builds his whole case around this one big idea, this academic term, ethnogenesis. It sounds complicated, but it's not. Just think of it like the birth of a people. It's that process where, over a long time, a group with a shared history and a shared place becomes something totally new and distinct. This idea is absolutely central to the FBA claim.
So, if you boil it all down, the main points are pretty straightforward. FBA proponents argue their lineage was uniquely created right here in America over 400+ years. They say they're not generic Africans, but a whole new cultural group, one that, by the way, created a culture that influences the entire globe, partly as a way to survive being othered for so long.
And yeah, this quote right here, it just cuts right to the heart of the matter. The host is making it crystal clear that this is all about self-definition. It's about pushing back against labels they feel don't fit, especially this broad Pan-African identity that, from their perspective, just doesn't capture their unique American story.
But, you know, a stance this strong is going to get some pushback, for sure. And it did. The first major clash in the conversation came from a Nigerian American caller, and it was all about that crucial question of the connection to Africa. The caller's challenge really comes down to this one big question. If the ancestry of Black Americans is, without a doubt, African, then why does it seem like there's this big push to separate from, or maybe even deny, that identity?
Yeah, and this guy, he does not hold back. He comes right out and accuses the FBA movement of being totally conflicted, of essentially denying their African roots. And this accusation, this idea of hating Africa, is a really explosive and common point of tension you see in these debates online.
So how does the host respond? Well, he completely reframes the whole thing by splitting it into two separate ideas: genetics and lineage. For him, genetics is your DNA, your deep, ancient ancestry from all over the world. But lineage? That's something else entirely. That's your specific documented cultural story in a particular place. And this is his whole point, right here, in a nutshell. He's not saying the genetic roots aren't from Africa. He's saying the lineage, the cultural story, the history of his people that was forged right here in America. And that distinction is the pillar of his entire argument.
Okay, so the debate gets even more interesting with the next major challenge. This time, a caller who identifies as Puerto Rican uses his own identity to question the whole FBI idea. So this caller comes in and says, hold on, you can't just draw a line in the sand and cut yourself off from your ancestry. He points to his own heritage, a mix of Taino, European, and African, and basically asks why FBA advocates would want to break that same kind of connection to Africa.
But here's where it gets really fascinating. The host takes that exact argument and flips it right back on him. He completely agrees with the caller's example, saying yes, the Puerto Rican identity came from that mix of Taino, European, and African influences, and it created a new and distinct people. And then he draws a straight line right over to the FBA identity. And this is basically the mic drop moment, his checkmate question to the caller. If Puerto Ricans went through their own ethnogenesis and became their own unique people, why can't the same logic apply to foundational Black Americans who also had this unique, centuries-long experience that forged a new identity? All right, so all of this leads us to the final part of the conversation, where the host lays out this bigger theory for why he thinks the FBI identity gets so much pushback. He calls it a war by proxy. His theory is pretty simple. He's basically saying, look, all the hate I get, it's not really about me as a person. He's arguing that he's just a symbol, a stand-in.
The real target, he says, is the very idea of a unique foundational Black American lineage.
He lays out what he sees as a step-by-step playbook that his critics use. First, they attack the messenger, him. Then they throw out what he calls straw man arguments, distractions like debating his trademarks. But he claims that when those arguments don't work, their real feelings come out and the true target is revealed, the FBA lineage itself.
So why all the resentment? Where does it come from? Well, the host has a theory. He suggests it's because FBA have a unique status. They aren't immigrants, they're foundational to the country. They're often seen as the creators of the culture. And globally, they're often considered the face of Blackness. He believes that this unique combination just stirs up jealousy and resistance.
So, at the end of the day, this whole incredibly passionate debate really boils down to one huge, provocative question for all of us to think about. When it comes to defining a people, what matters more? The facts of their history and genetics, or the right of those people, after their own long and unique journey, to finally stand up and name themselves?